Welcome everyone. Happy to kick this off, our first kind of sort of fall um, council meeting. And this is a public meeting. So we may have other folks tuned in watching, and they will have a chance to also submit their questions if anything comes up. So welcome everyone. I want to jump in because we have a pretty big, kind of line of things I'm really excited to discuss. And as you can see the agenda, first off, I want to welcome some new members to this effort, then give you all a quick AI program and lab update. And then we have updates regarding our work happening around ethics, DNA guide, which Dr. Rose Procter will jump in and talk about in a minute. Then we have some folks from our partners, Paragon Public Policy, where they will talk about the work that they've been working on for Gen AI guidance. Then we have General Counsel Work Groups updates by Donna, and then we open this up for discussion. So let me jump into the first part, which is just the overall update. But before that, I wanna have a couple welcomes here. So we have a couple members that have joined the council. The first person is Tishan Simpson. Ms. Simpson has 10 years of experience in information technology, over 17 years of contracts and procurement experience working out of GDOT, Department of Transportation, Georgia Tech, Xerox Global Procurement, MARTA, and currently she is the manager of information technology statewide sourcing team at the Department of Administrative Services in the State Purchasing Division. We're really excited to have her skill set to be part of the council. A warm welcome to Ms. Simpson. Our next council member I would love to welcome is Bill Curtis Davidson. And Bill brings a variety of talents, and what really kind of put Bill on my radar was his experience in accessibility, and also he is a veteran of a lot of U.S. public sector work that has been happening. He works as a senior specialist at Cadmus Group and is an experienced change agent. He has a lot of experience around AI, AR, VR, XR, and just overall brings a lot of expertise in the realms of accessible product innovation, quality management, and maturity modeling. We will be updating everyone's bios up on the website. So welcome, Bill. We are also excited to welcome Scott Baker. Now, Scott is actually on the GTA side, and Scott is our unit director for within the Office of AI, and you all will be seeing Scott a lot, and I'm happy to kind of share a lot of these responsibilities with Scott now going forward. And Scott comes from NCR. Scott has a ton of AI related, product related experience, and Scott, if you can just briefly walk us through some of your very high level bio and say hello to the council.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and join the team. I think there's this is a great time to be doing this kind of work, and I want to do something with a mission. I couldn't think of anything better than to join GTA and work for the citizens of Georgia. Like Nikhil was saying, my background has been in product design. A lot of the stuff I've worked at Cox, at Coca-Cola, and IT and technology there. And for the past 6 years, I was with NCR as a vice president there, working on product development. And a lot of the products that we had were using AI, even before Gen AI became all the rage. So very experienced in kind of thinking through a lot of that, how it's implemented, but also, how to ensure that it's compliant and adheres to laws and things like that, because we did banking, and I can say I've dealt with a lot of that kind of stuff as well. So super excited to join the team. I think it'll be, once we get the lab going and start doing some of the projects, it's going to be a very exciting time. I think I look forward to working with all of you. Back to you, Nicole.
Oh, looks like I just got kicked off Zoom. Let me reshare my screen. Sorry about that. Okay, are you all able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I missed the last few seconds of your intro, Scott, because I think I just got kicked off.
Nothing you haven't heard
Got
already.
really
And by the way, my bio here sounds a little harsh that I didn't actually select a little line about shipping my kid off. I love my kid very much, but I was very excited to announce that he got a Fulbright scholarship. So he's actually in Mexico on a Fulbright scholarship. I'm a very good dad, by the way.
Okay, Nikhil, are you still there?
I think he froze again. Oh no.
Yeah, he keeps freezing up for
That's
some
weird.
reason.
Yeah. He's gonna have to re-log in.
While Nikhil's coming back in, Tashawn, did you want to come on and tell us a little bit about you?
I'm sure. Well, Nikhil kind of covered a lot of it, but I'm really excited to be a part of this effort. I worked in IT most of my career and transitioned to the business side in the late, like around 2008, 2010. So it's been a while, but this is actually my first experience at DOES not being a part of IT
Okay.
and doing business support. So I always love to be in the room with the IT folks, to one, for nostalgia's sake, but also because that's where you really learn a lot of what's needed to do good contracts for the state agencies to have what they need. So this is going to be really helpful for us and all the different things that we have planned coming down the pipeline to support the different efforts to innovate and help the agencies to service the state and the citizens. So really excited to be here and hear about what you guys have done. I got a few of the past decks, so really interesting activities that you guys have going on. So I'm looking forward to being a part of it.
Okay. And then was it Brent or Bill?
Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, okay.
That was Bill. I'll be really
Yeah.
brief. It looks like Nikhil's back. Thank you, Shanzia, for and everyone for inviting me to the advisory council. This is Bill Curtis Davidson. As Nikhil mentioned, I work at the intersection of AI, governance, disability inclusion, accessibility, a lot of workforce transformation type initiatives as well. I currently support the U.S. Department of Labor, for example, primarily in my work. But I'm really excited. I'm also a proud Georgia Tech graduate, as well as Atlanta College of Art, now part of SCAD. So I have been in Atlanta for most of my life, actually a resident here in Georgia, and I'm super excited to be able to contribute any resources and knowledge I have to the work of the council. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you and welcome also. Okay, Nikhil, are you back?
I am back. Are you
Okay.
able to hear me okay? Okay, I don't know what's going on. I have a new machine, and then Zoom's not getting along with this new machine, looks like, but good, we're good. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Thank you so much again. Yeah, we'll go ahead. Donna, do you want to drive going forward?
I don't mind sharing the slides. If you just want to tell me when you want to change the slide, that's fine.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, cool. So I just want to give a high level overview of the work that's happening within all the working groups. So Donna will talk about the specifics of each of these, but from a work group perspective, we have been, as groups, working on training oversight, procurement, generative AI, and ethics. At this point, we have generative AI and the ethics work, like probably like the most in-depth to the level that, we can actually, give substantial updates, and we're looking at rolling those out pretty soon, specifically Gen AI. Paragon, once we get there, we will have some updates from the fellows from Paragon Public Policy, and Dr. Procter will talk about the ethics DNA guide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as far as the program is concerned, one of the things that I've always been talking about is our innovation lab. So this is truly a workspace that is being created by GTA for agencies to work with industry partners and to validate concepts, to experiment, to make sure that we are really rolling out any technology such as AI in a much responsible way. And for that, we need a good support from our industry partners. And that's why GTA has issued a request for qualified contractors, RFQC. This is purely to pre-qualify, think of it from a federal perspective as like a BPA, blanket purchase agreement, where like you pre-qualify a set of industry partners, and then as and when agencies have an opportunity to put together their business problems in form of a use case and a case study, we basically, then put that out as something that we need a solution for. And then we have the idea of having our industry partners bid on that, or, come to us with solutions, and almost think of it as like a reverse Shark Tank of, sort that, we would have folks actually giving you solutions, and our agencies then get to pick and choose the direction that they want to follow. So we posted this RFQC last month in August. Bids are due in a few days by September, and we are planning on announcing the selection and award in early Jan 2025. That's after like us going through all of the bids. At this point, we're looking at somewhere close to 70 interests, because through our tool, we have good visibility into who all have started the initiation process in submitting a bid. Although they haven't submitted it, we can see who has started, and that's getting close to about 70 now. So we know that we are like expecting a lot of bids for this. So we are planning on making sure we have enough time to go through, evaluate, and then accordingly award them. Next slide, please. And this is somewhere something Scott can jump in if you can, Scott, and give an update. I know you're working closely with a lot of these on-ground changes to the lab.
Yeah. This is very exciting. So part of the interesting part here is we got a blank canvas to work with, which is very rare. That's awesome. It's up on the 7th floor of the building, and we're going to be renovating this over the next couple of months. It will hopefully really inspire teams to think future, because with this, we're going to have a nice presentation area where vendors can come in and do demonstrations. We'll probably be using it for workshops where we're doing brainstorming and ideation on, what can be scaling across agencies, what kinds of activity can we do with data, just all kinds of interesting things there. And then obviously it will be great to have presentations there. So we could focus on specific topics and bring in multiple vendors, or vendors that have a couple of solutions, so that folks can come in and look at it and really assess how things are working. I'd love to be using it for testing as well. And we've talked about potentially getting some interns from local colleges involved, so that it's really kind of a lively place that's generating not just ideas from vendors, but a number of agencies could be involved, as well as outside interests like students. I'm excited about it. You can see the layout, the green area highlighted at the top is kind of the space. It is a very large room. It used, I believe it was the board of directors room, or the conference room upstairs.
Yep.
So,
The boardroom.
The boardroom. Sorry, didn't have the term down. I would imagine we're already there's studs in the walls exposed. Lots of things are changing day by day. I've been up there pretty much every day, taking pictures and things like that. So I think over the next few weeks, we'll start to see it come alive.
It is really exciting, and as the space builds up, like we really are getting excited about like having trainings, presentations, workshops, demonstrations, like, you know, other than the actual hands-on work happening with agencies, like we really want to make sure that we maximize the users lab and also hope that our agencies make the most of it as well. So really
Yeah,
exciting.
absolutely. And this kind of thing, just from my experience at past companies I've worked with in the private sector, this kind of space really does breed creativity, and I think it becomes like a hub for this kind of stuff. So I think this is going to be a really nice addition to GTA and to the states.
Yeah. Thank you. Next slide, Donna. Thank you. So I'll invite Dr. Rose Procter to give us an update on the ethics DNA guide work.
Yeah, so thanks, Nikhil. Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize. We had a really big event yesterday for 800 leaders. So what also left with them was my voice. So hopefully you can hear me okay. It's slowly returning to me this afternoon. But as Nikhil said, I'm Rose. I get the honor of serving as the Executive Director for the Truist Center for Ethical Leadership here at the University of North Georgia. But I'm also in a dual capacity as the Associate Director for Ethics Compliance at the University System of Georgia as well. So, Bill, I heard you mention Georgia Tech. You saw my little excitement there as one of our USG institutions. And I know we have lots of representation from our different institutions on the call. Nikhil and I have been working really hard along with many of our partners on just kind of the ethics approach. The ethics DNA guide itself is one aspect of that approach, along with some training that we'll be doing. So we will need to coordinate with the training oversight committee. And so I'll get with Nikhil and Donna on that. But we're making a lot of progress, and we should probably have kind of the overview kind of white paper of just all the aspects of the project pretty soon. We also are leaning in to start gathering information, just even in helping us around some of our definitions, some of the foundations around what we mean when we talk about advanced or emerging technologies, particularly around AI or generative AI, or some complex systems. So we've developed a survey that we're going to send out directly only to advisory council members currently. Just to get your feedback, give us a little bit of kind of some, I guess, just to get a foundation of where we even are on how we define these different systems or technologies. And then we'll send that out beyond. So to some of the state agencies that Sean and Nikhil would like to get some feedback, maybe the CIOs of different agencies. And then we can also send it externally, maybe citizens or different stakeholders to start gathering some of that feedback. So the survey is prepared. I'll send that to Nikhil so that we can actually send that out and follow up from this meeting. And that we'll ask you guys over the next 10 days to just complete that survey. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes. There's going to be different phases of surveys here in the fall. This will be the initial one, but I believe there'll be probably 3 or 4 different ones, just kind of drilling in on some different areas, and particularly some values that we want to feed into in the training as far as state organizations in Georgia. So made a lot of progress there. Also just want to advise the advisory council. I think many of you met Dr. Baird. Dr. Catherine Baird is the CEO and founder of Ethics Game in Colorado. Had a lot of different partnerships. I think they work with over 200 higher education institutions, did a big partnership with Duke University as well. But she also is a partner on this, and you're welcome to reach out to her at any time with any thoughts or any kind of research. So we've contracted Ethics Game to help us with some research. So if you guys have questions or systems or technologies that it's like, I want to know more about this, but you don't have the time to research, I would welcome those emails just to rose.procter@ung.edu. We'll start researching that and then bring that in and send that out to the committee members. And Nikhil, that can be, to anybody if we've got something maybe inside GTA or the governor's office as well. So we'll send that survey out and follow up from today's call. And then I'm hopeful in the next 30 days or 45 days to be able to provide you kind of the first overview of everything. It will break down into an overall guide for the state of Georgia. The ethics DNA is kind of a play off the concept of genetic code, of what are the ethical considerations we should be implementing in all of our decisions, and particularly implementations of new technologies within our state organizations. But there'll also be different layers of that guide. So we think it's really important to kind of look at the roles of people in our agencies. So one are our executive leaders and our senior leadership that are making decisions or maybe approving or signing off on the purchase or integration of such technologies in our agencies. Then there's those that actually purchase it. So in procurement, different questions and thoughts for them as they're checking things on a vendor or a contract. And then those that are going to be using or actually implementing the technology, which is usually a lot of different business units. But as you mentioned earlier, Ms. Simpson, IT has a major role in that, particularly as the interface office sometimes with these technologies. And then beyond that, we'll also have a particular training. So we're looking at having kind of an overview video that can be accessible to all in the state from the Georgia Technology Authority. But then we'll have particular trainings that are both video and in person, depending on what we think the needs are of the different agencies. So exciting stuff. It's been a really fun project to work on. I will say at times, and Nikhil and I kind of joke sometimes, like, oh, I'm down another rabbit hole. We were talking about AI symbiosis this weekend and some of the things and moving parts at Neuralink. So you can imagine it was interesting stuff. And I say interesting with a caveat of terrifying and interesting. So thanks, Nikhil, for letting us provide an update. Once we send that survey out, if you guys have any questions or complications, please just reach out.
Thank you so much, Rose. Great, awesome. Any questions around this particular effort for Rose? Cool. If not, let's move to the Paragon Policy Fellowship update for Gen AI guidance. So just to give everyone a quick overview of like what has been happening, we have been working with Paragon Policy Fellowship since I want to say early spring, and really relied on them and the cohort to do some extensive research within the US, internationally, about how organizations are implementing generative AI specifically, and ask them to put together their research and some form of guidance. And what we are hoping to do is take that guidance and take that research, and then as part of GTA and our policy guidelines and standards team, we will see what makes sense to convert something into a standard or something into a set of guidelines. And then we would be, once Sean approves them, we can have them published as a standard or rolled out as certain guidelines. So, this has been really, really interesting for me because like it's a completely different set of energy that I got to work with, set of students, and with two different cohorts. So it has been really refreshing to work with them. I'm really appreciative to all the hard work that they have done. And I'm pretty sure once they start presenting, you will see the amount of work that has gone into it. I know you all have a slide deck. As Shivam, are you gonna be presenting, or someone else?
Yep, I can share my screen.
Okay, awesome.
Can everyone see?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, first of all, thank you, Nikhil, for the introduction. Abhay and I are really excited to talk about Paragon Fellowship and the work that we've been doing for the last 7 or 8 months. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and introduce our team. So up on the screen, you will see the fellows from both this cohort as well as the last cohort. And if you look in the bottom left corner, you'll see our project lead, Blair, who I think is in the audience, and she's really the one who's kept the wheels running for this whole project. So yeah, we've had an incredible team, and I'm excited to talk about all the amazing work we've done. So let's get right into it. Now, the first thing that we want to share was the background, where it was that we were starting at the beginning of this fellowship. And it's pretty undeniable that generative AI is one of those rapidly advancing technologies. And it kind of has this unique ability to process vast amounts of data and produce outputs that streamline processes and help automate tasks that would otherwise be pretty complex. So it's really no surprises that a sector like government employees would want to take advantage of its capabilities. But generative AI, like any other technology, has its risks. And so what the starting point for this fellowship was, could we come up with some sort of document that aids the state of Georgia in providing standards that encourages the use of generative AI in ways that are innovative and productive, but also provide some sort of guardrails to make sure that generative AI isn't used in a unsafe or untransparent manner. So that was the starting point, and by the end of this fellowship, we would have gone through 3 cohorts: the spring cohort, the summer cohort, and the fall cohort. Now, I should mention that this slide is not just the timeline for our project, but it's also the timeline for today's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the work that we did in the spring, and then I'll pass it off to my co-fellow, Abe, who will talk about the work we did in the summer, as well as some of the work that we hope to do in the next fall cohort. Now, the starting point for this research was to look at what other people were doing. Generative AI is relatively new, so there wasn't a lot out there, but nonetheless, there certainly were institutions that provided some foundational groundwork for where Georgia could go from thereafter. Now, the first thing that we looked at was obviously summaries of policies and actual guidelines, as well as the principles that kind of guided those guidelines. We also looked at example use cases. There are some states that provided, particular AI applications that were permissible, and then some that were not. And so we looked at if we could do something similar for Georgia. And then lastly, we looked at strengths and weaknesses of these different guidelines. And this was particularly useful because, as I mentioned, Gen AI is relatively new. And so being very critical when looking at other states and cities policies was super helpful because it allowed us to determine, okay, what is it that we want Georgia to take away and similarly reproduce, or where are some things that we definitely want Georgia to avoid. Now, there were some key takeaways that we took from our guideline review. The first of which is that across every document, nearly every guideline was based on a certain set of principles. Some states and cities were more concerned with innovation and productivity, and others were more concerned with risk mitigation or data privacy. Whatever it was that Georgia wanted to focus on and what we wanted the final product to be, we first had to decide what the principles that we wanted to push forward. The second finding was that there's a wide spectrum on how you can actually enforce AI. So there are some cities like Boston who have a pretty lax approach to letting their employees use generative AI. But on the other hand, there's some states that are very strict about it. They have to go through a pretty rigorous application in order to allow generative AI to be used in some sort of context. And the key takeaway from this is that there's no correct single way to administer a Gen AI, but rather to kind of figure out what is Georgia's needs for its employees, where its needs for its agencies, and then based on that information, tailor how to best adjust the standards accordingly. And the last finding is that AI is constantly changing. There were several instances in which we saw a state or a city publish some sort of standard, and then even just a few months later, they would adjust or recall their statement because there was some new change in Gen AI. And so it was really helpful in letting us know that Gen AI is rapidly changing, and for Georgia's Gen AI standards to be the most effective, we need to make sure there's some sort of mechanisms in which it can be either updated or revised. Now, there were some deliverables that we created in the spring cohort as well. Like I mentioned earlier, these were mostly research memos. The first of which was a memo on ethical concerns. There were really 4 ethical concerns that jumped out to us as something that needs to be taken into consideration when Georgia is drafting its standards. The first of which was data privacy. As one could imagine, if you're dealing with maybe some private health data or some sensitive financial information, that is data that you want to make sure is private throughout the entire application process from start to finish. And it's also something you don't want it to be in the training data where it could be, maybe repeated or replicated in some sort of inappropriate context. The next was legal compliance, which is pretty straightforward. We wanted to make sure that employees, when they were using Gen AI, were not just compliant with Georgia's Gen AI standards, but compliant with like federal and state laws more broadly, more specifically Georgia's AI laws. Next was transparency. We thought it was really important for users to know that they were interacting with AI, as opposed to just like, you can imagine it being problematic if you jump on a government website and you read an article just to find out later that the entire thing was written by ChatGPT. And the last thing was accountability. I think it's really easy with especially AI for people to point at it and kind of not entirely know where the problem went wrong because it's a bit black boxy. But we thought accountability was really important. That way, employees and agencies can recognize what went wrong when using AI and what to do to prevent those mistakes from happening in the future. The next memo was on enforcement policy. So as we all know, GTA does not have an enforcement arm, which means it lends the possibility that AI could be used in a context which isn't either mandated or regulated, what we refer to as shadow AI. So it was really important to stress that when Georgia's AI standards are written, they're done so in a way that encourages employees to comply with them, since enforcement can be challenging. Next, we created definitions and glossary document. The average employee probably doesn't know the definition of support vector machine or hallucination or whatever technical term it may be. So we wanted to create a document that laid out all the terms that would appear in the standards in a way that was both well-defined as well as well understood. And lastly was a risk mitigation framework. So this is slightly different from the standards, but what we were looking to do is create some sort of rubric or framework that allows employees to determine what is permissible and what's prohibited when using Gen AI. So the way we went about this is split up the typical use cases of Gen AI, which we found to be information processing, coding, interpreting software, user interaction, and content generation. And this table kind of gives you an idea of what's allowed and what's not allowed. So if you look at software, for example, using Gen AI to debug your existing code is fine. But if you use a ChatGPT to write an entire script of code without any human oversight, that can lead to some problems pretty fast. The last column over there is questions to consider, which just gives users just a general grasp of what they should be taken into consideration when using AI applications. And it's worth mentioning that this table isn't entirely inclusive. It's meant to be kind of broad to give employees a sense of how things are to work without restricting them and saying, oh, you can only do this or you can't only do that. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Abhay now, who's going to talk to us about the work of the summer.
All right, thanks, Siobhan. So on the next slide here, we'll see that the result of the research that we were working on in the spring is that in the summer, we came up with a generative AI standards document that we gave to Nikhil and that we got feedback from him on. We've got some screenshots of some of the pages on the next slide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the big sections of this document kind of in turn. So Siobhan, could you give me the standards?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so here's kind of what the standards look like, but we've changed this even in the time that between the slide being made and now. So let's go through each of these sections in turn. So the first thing is safety principles, and this is probably the most important part. We categorize these into a few big areas. The first is acceptable generative AI use. Make sure that you're using safe generative AI platforms or learning models. Eventually, the GTA is going to come out with a list of pre-vetted AI platforms that are approved by the state and safe to use. And keep records of what you're telling the AI. In other words, don't delete your conversation with a chatbot, because if you got some information from that place, you need to be able to track it down in case that ends up being inaccurate or misleading later. The second is when you're reviewing your generative AI content, really I want to draw attention to that third one, which is don't let the AI make decisions. AI is not a person and it can't be held accountable for its decisions. And so when we were talking about balancing innovation with security, this is one area to definitely lean on security, because just because the AI can talk like a person doesn't necessarily mean it can make decisions like a person. The next is safety and risk mitigation, which is that AI should always be supervised by a human, and you need to be aware of what information you're giving the AI, because what you give it influences what comes back out to you. You need to be phrasing your questions to the AI in a neutral way so that you're getting accurate and unbiased information. The last thing is data privacy, and this is, of course, extremely important. Siobhan touched on it earlier. Always, 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 we need to be avoiding entering personally identifying information into a training model. Because if that information is taken by the AI and used to train it, that could pop up in any number of places that the state has no control over. And this, of course, leads back into avoiding feeding the model with biased information. And of course, using not personal but government accounts whenever entering government information into an AI learning model. The next thing that Siobhan mentioned, and then ended up becoming a section in our standards document, was enforcement. Shadow AI is really the big problem here. we want to avoid people using generative AI without citation or acknowledgement, because then there's no kind of paper trail to determine where information is coming from. But since the GTA is not going to be playing whack-a-mole with individual uses of AI, what we really want is a culture of trust and acknowledgement. Now, this is a little different from a lot of the AI standards we've seen, in that we want even brainstorming that you've done through AI, or you've written a document through AI, just to get a nod to the fact that there was AI involved in that process somewhere. We don't necessarily want full citations everywhere, because that might slow everything down and that might be slowing the constituent services. But there needs to be acknowledgement somewhere that AI was used in the process of creating some document or conducting some research for the state. But ultimately, we're trusting Georgia employees to make standards compliant decisions. That's really the big point of the enforcement policy, is we want to create a culture of trust where that is where within that process we're using AI safely. And so in order to do that, really there's three things we want to encourage. First is acknowledging AI, like I just said. The second is using AI as a collaborative tool. AI should not be something that people feel compelled to kind of hide away and use by themselves kind of shamefully because they feel like they're not supposed to be using it. We want people to be talking about AI. We want people to be collaborating using AI. And the final thing is limiting risks to any kind of personal information or sensitive information that should remain confidential. And that's really where that framework comes in from earlier. Here in the AI citation guide, again, like I said, AI does not need to be extensively cited using some big format everywhere, unless it's some big formal government document. However, even in informal internal communication or while drafting a document or conducting some research, you've got to balance convenience with transparency. But at the end of the day, that transparency has got to be there. You've got to acknowledge where the AI has been used, what kind of research has been conducted with it, and what information has been received from a learning model. And finally, this cohort, we worked on biases through AI. Now, biases through AI is not just societal biases, but also biases within the model itself. AI can have incomplete training data, for instance, that leads to incomplete answers. And AI is only as good as what it's learned. AI can also choose certain data sets over others, or could be fed with certain data sets over others, which could lead to it having blind spots in its reasoning. And finally, there's confirmation bias, which I touched on a little earlier, which is the idea that if you phrase a question in a certain way, the AI might give you an answer that reinforces the answer you were expecting rather than the answer that might be true. This is why it's really important to get in the practice of questioning the AI in a neutral way so you can avoid biasing the answer. And the most important mitigation strategy for that is really this third one, which is third-party verification. Any information that comes through AI, there's got to be a source that's verifying that information. Because at the end of the day, AI is a tool. It's a very useful tool, but it is a tool. And you should be trying to find other sources of information that can back up what you're getting from the AI. Now, lastly, I want to touch briefly on what we plan to do in the fall based on conversations with Nikhil and Scott. One is developing educational resources and employee training that can help Georgia employees better take advantage of Gen AI. And the second is finding ways to improve the constituent service experience using AI, because that's really the biggest driver of AI for government, is how can we make citizens' lives better? How can we make their interactions with government smoother? Can we, for instance, make chatbots that are running on their own learning models that can answer people's questions accurately and that maybe don't need as much human drudgery? So that kind of thing, doing research on that is also something we're going to be looking at in the fall. And with that, I will give up the rest of our time. I really appreciate everyone checking in on us.
Thank you so much, Abhay and Shawam. This has been incredible. A lot of good work, and it's been a pleasure working with you all, and looking forward to working with the fall cohort as well. The good part is that now that we have our work group, Gen AI work group together, the fall cohort will work closely with that work group as well. So looking forward to that. Does the council have any feedback, any comments for Paragon's work?
Just to reiterate what you said, great job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks to all of you. Really
This is
appreciate
great.
your
This is
work.
great. This is a great step forward, and I think it's a great job to lay the foundation for especially generative AI in the state. Great.
I
Awesome.
agree
Thanks so much.
wholeheartedly. absolutely the framework, as well as looking at all the other states and what they're doing with the various use cases across the organization, and being very thoughtful in how it relates to both the security aspect and the usability and back to data privacy. So thank you guys very much.
I just had a quick question. I agree. I think the work is great. And I know you just mentioned that there's going to be training. Is that going to also include giving guidance to the agencies on pre-existing, like things they've already kind of contracted for that they may have agreed to AI unwittingly, or that they need to kind of determine how that's being utilized so they can make informed decisions about how to move forward?
That's a really good question. Yes, the intent will be to understand what has been already agreed upon. A big part of that is going to be through the work that we are doing with our enterprise governance and planning team as part of the STAR inventory. This year we have added a few AI related questions to that inventory. So up until last year, we just collected all of the applications that were part of our state footprint. But this year, we are also asking if agencies are aware of any source of automated decision-making systems running within their existing applications, and we will take it from there. This particular specific work will happen more around generative AI, but from a big picture AI perspective, we first need to know where we stand, what we have through the years, and then we'll take it from there. Cool.
If I may just very briefly, Nikhil, first I want to just echo what everyone has said. Excellent work, very thoughtful. One quick question, and we don't need to address it now. Maybe the Gen AI group can engage further in this discussion. There's emphasis on human supervision of Gen AI, which prima facie makes sense. But that being the approach to eliminate biases, what I would also ask is, what's the risk of that perpetuating biases? Because in a sense, we're giving tremendous agency to a given supervisor, and there are potential risks that come with that and ways to offset how that might be perpetuated in this system. There are similar thoughts that I have on a few other pieces where the risks of doing certain things might need to be considered further to offset them.
That is a really good point. Absolutely. Noted. And I think, like you said, yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind and work on it. We have a question here that basically says, will there be consideration for generative AI for art that is used by communications teams? It seems that the focus is on LLMs, but we have interest in graphic design programs that doesn't touch written content. I mean, I can start just thinking, when 2023 gave us multimodal generative AI, this will be a challenge, and also this will be an opportunity across a lot of agencies within the communications team where we may lean on AI tools to actually create graphics. I can share what I have been doing. So when Sean and I have been going around talking about things and talking about AI, depending on the conference and depending on the topic, literally, you get no time to create a new slide deck for that particular purpose. So I've been leaning a lot on tools like Midjourney or Adobe, but always have been very clear that this image is generated using XYZ, whatever. So that's part of that transparency. But again, nothing that I've created graphically has led to a decision or led to anything that affects someone. Obviously, it's part of what I have been conveying and communicating, but the part that this is generated by AI is very clear when those slides are seen. I'm just wondering if any other council members have thoughts around this topic of graphic generations. So I guess citing it is a good start. And I guess once we know a little more about the use cases, we can be a little better aware of like how we use those. Cool. Donna, I will give it back to you to share the slide deck. I think the next part is pretty much
All right.
your
Bill
part
had
of.
his hand up.
Sorry?
Bill had his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I was just gonna, and this is Bill Curtis Davidson. I was just gonna add in, Nikhil, I think some of the frame up that Arun was mentioning as well applies to visual or graphical Gen AI, right? So for example, in our work with disability or other human diversity factors, generative AI may generate based on the prompts from the human, as well as what's in the LLM or the generative AI libraries. It will render inappropriate things, right? So there's been a lot of problems with that. So whether it's in text or other modalities like visual or PowerPoint presentations, things like that, the principles are pretty much the same, I think, but there are different things to look for. So I was just going to compliment. And also, while I just want to add how appreciative I am as my first meeting here with you all, but I really enjoyed the presentation so far, as in particular the last one about some of the details. And I'm looking forward to providing more concrete input where appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.
Nikhil, if I could just make a very quick observation, which may be useful for us to consider going forward. With generative AI, both on the image side as well as on the text side and other visual aspects, on the one hand, you have free range prompting, which does have tremendous variation in prompting that can lead to various types of responses, including potential hallucinations and things of that sort. On the other hand, you can too tightly curate it and structure it, which takes away from the flexibility of generative AI. So in a sense, there is a tension between overly curating versus overly leaving free flow. And from use case standpoint, what might be useful to distill in are the aspects of the prompt which need to be tightened and not, they're there, right? I mean, they're just like your control points within the prompt versus the others, which are like stylistically, maybe the content is varied, but the factual aspects are not varied.
Yeah.
So what I would just say is, rather than think about prompt curated and flexible, maybe within the prompt, the control points versus the flexible points, partitioning it provides for both aspects. That's just a very quick observations.
No, that's a really good point. And again, I'm just thinking, going back to the question which was asked in the context of communication using those graphics. Like today, when we use, for example, graphics on, say, Georgia.gov, there are certain things that we are very intentional about, very careful about, of like what to show, what not to show. Are we representing our population well? So I feel like that's kind of like the bias that you were also talking about, where like sometimes, a human intentionally or unintentionally inserts their biases as well. So yeah, this is definitely a interesting topic for sure. And I think the more I think about this, maybe we should, add a little bit of graphical guidelines in the other work that we are creating as well. Cool. Sounds good. All right, Donna, back to you. Take it away.
Okay, sure. I have had the opportunity to be the facilitator on a couple of our other working groups. So I'll speak for the groups, but please do chime in, working group members, if there's anything else that you'd like to add. I'll start with the training working group. The group got together a couple of times to talk about priorities for training for state employees, as well as for a leadership level. So general state employees versus those leaders who might be making decisions about AI tools and other sorts of procurements, et cetera. And we also talked about a few potential sources for training material. The group aligned on some priorities. It's a lot to cover. And so with the idea of where can we mitigate the most risk, where can we make the most difference in the shortest time span, they came out with some priorities. So priority 1 is general state employee training to cover off on the basics of AI ethics and also risks and opportunities with AI tools. And then the plan is to build on that, of course, over time, adding more topics and more courses as appropriate, and even offer some how-to training on some of the tools which are available. And we'll be very interested, of course, to see what the Paragon Fellows have to say about that. And of course, also working with Rose and on the ethics side of it. The second priority is aimed at the leadership. We came up with kind of a persona of who is this targeting, and then people can self-select to take these leadership training courses. And this would be more in depth around the ethics of AI for these decision makers, and more in depth about the responsible use and procurement requirements for these sorts of tools. So those are the priorities. And then also in speaking to potential suppliers of the coursework, we're very lucky on the working group itself. We have 2 members from Georgia Tech, both Brent and Stephen are on the working group, and Georgia Tech has a couple of different streams of training that they're working on that we might be able to tap into. So the next step there is Scott is exploring both of those with Brent and then with Stephen and his team to see what we might be able to pull out to offer training to our state employees as well as the leadership level of state employees. There's also some prepackaged courses in Coursera that are available. We're reviewing those. Some of those are kind of long. Some of them might be more targeted to a specific audience, but we can pick bits and pieces of those to offer a more condensed and more specific training for state employees. So that's another consideration that the working group will kind of work through. So next steps is further investigate those courses and the path for the general training. And then also, of course, align with Rose and your team about what we might be able to offer for ethics in the general training as well as the leadership training. Anything anyone from the working group on training would like to add? Okay. All right. The next working group that I facilitated was our data privacy working group. And this one was really interesting. We had some state CIOs in there who are in the room today, as well as On, who of course represents GTA as legal counsel. So, and the data officers. So we have a very lively discussion. We talked a lot about what the different agencies need, depending on, you know, what kind of the topic is. We have healthcare, we have security, we have, you know, things like the corrections department that has certain data that needs to be maintained in a very private way with certain restrictions and things that they need to follow. So what we recognized is from an enterprise level, standards and guidelines have to be very broad. The agency level can then hone in on kind of what the specifics are needed for that sort of data at the agency level. So interestingly, after a lot of conversation, the group tended to align toward maybe we should have a policy about AI data privacy, but really then reflect back that AI data privacy really defers to the enterprise data privacy standards and guidelines that are then the responsibility of GTA to establish and then, you know, maintain across the enterprise. So AI data privacy is not really that different from generalized data privacy. And so the next step there is it's passed on to the larger, broader team. It's kind of outside of the purview of just the AI working group on that. Anything anyone would like to add, Jason, Chad, on? Okay. All right. Great. The third working group is procurement, and this working group has not met yet, so I don't really have too much of an update, but I will say we have a starter outline, and we'll pick up with meetings to kind of work through requirements, standards, and guidelines around procurement of AI tools in the short term. Any questions?
not a question, Donna, but I will say we're going to specifically give emphasis to purchasing and procurement in what we're looking at as one standalone training and guide for the ethics DNA, because we just felt like that is such an important piece. So I'll coordinate with you on that soon. Hopefully we should have something for you to look at in the next couple, like I said, in the next 30 days or so we can kind of start fleshing that out. But I think we can be helpful there as well.
Thank you. That's fantastic. All right. If there are no other questions, I'll pass it to Nikhil, and you have general questions.
Yeah, thank you for the updates, Donna. And yeah, you're right. I mean, at this point, like with some of the work getting formed to the point where now we can see some cross-pollination happening between the work that is happening across different streams. So that is something we hope to do that in fall. Last but not the least, we have our summit coming up again, Emerging Tech, December 6th. We will send out an email to everybody. We would love for everyone to attend. And it's going to be at the Westin in Buckhead. So again, December 6th, which is a Friday, it's going to be a one-day summit, and we are going to be formalized. Most of you should be on the advisory team for that summit as well. And Helen Kang may have reached out to you. Definitely everybody who is on the council, has been offered to participate in formalizing the content and the agenda for the summit. So thank you again for doing that. And we look forward to another really helpful summit. This time we are focusing enough spotlight on data as well, along with AI. So we will have plenty to discuss in a week or so when we get together. I'm just taking a look at time. We're right about the top of the hour. If anybody has any thoughts. Well, if not, thank you again for everyone's time. Really appreciate it. Again, thank you so much, Paragon team, for joining us and presenting your work. And again, we'll look forward to keeping working with you all. And we'll see everyone next month at our next council meeting.
Thanks, Nikhil. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
Take care.